In the AWS Developers Podcast today, we are talking about continuous integration for iOS application at scale. Stay tuned, we explain that. Good morning. Thank you for downloading the AWS Developers Podcast. We are available in all good podcast applications. Share your feedback, share a little star or little thumbs up. Today, as I said in the introduction, we are going to talk about continuous integration for iOS application using macOS in the cloud. We are going to explain that with Sofiane Medboui. You're the CTO and the co-founder of a company called bsport. We are in your offices in Paris. Thank you for welcoming us here. bsport, what is it? What is the company?
Yeah, bsport is a startup. So we have basically first a big SaaS for the studio owners from yoga, Pilates, boxing, you name it. And these guys need a system to manage all their activity. So it can be the booking, it's the payments, their marketing. Basically, they open a computer, they open their email, and they open bsport, and we manage everything. But we don't stop on the B2B side. We also work with the clients. So the users, people like you and me, want to book their session to go to their yoga session.
You, not me, but okay.
Yeah, me, maybe not me that much, but some people want to book their session to the yoga or the Pilates, and for that they go via the website or the studios, via our widget, but mainly via the mobile application. And we have mobile application for iOS, for Android, and they are all branded to the studio. So
for your customer, so you're making a white label application for studio or a gym room so that their customer can book an appointment and probably other things. And so you have one application per customer? Yeah,
exactly. Actually, two applications for Android and iOS, and per studio. Some studio might not want the white label application, but most of them want, which means that now we have more than 1,000 applications multiplied by 2, but more than that.
1,000 iOS applications. So the same code base, but rebranded for different customers?
Exactly. We use the same code base with some JSON configuration. Some of it is static, some of it is dynamic. Like you called our API and we send new settings and new customization option, but it's one code base exactly and one repository.
Wow. And building an Android app, it's quite easy, quote, quote. I mean, you use a Linux system, but for iOS application, you need macOS. Just before going to the build, I'm a bit curious about your application because I'm building a mobile application myself. So what are the language, the tools, the framework? Is it like Flutter or native Swift or something else?
Yeah, so we decided React Native. It was a few years ago. We started the first line of code 5 years ago. It was, from what we thought at that point, the most stable and generic solution for also the one that look more
native.
Yeah, very close to native, more closer and closer to native, to be honest, even if it's not Flutter, but very easy to use, especially when all our front-end developers are working in React.js on the web, so you can share knowledge and good practices. So React Native is really the core of the framework. On top of it, we use Fastlane to manage all the build phases, and we have a couple of obviously some React Native package, but nothing exceptional. I would say nothing exotic. Redux is our state management, React navigation for the routing, the usual set of packages. And I want to say that React Native is, to be honest, is a quite good framework for that. It has its own limitation. It's not as close as native as can be, for example, Flutter, but if you dig it, if you want to work performance, you can do whatever you want with React Native, especially nowadays.
And you managed to share the same code base between Android and iOS thanks to React Native?
Yeah, there is a very, very, very little set of pages and components where you have to make a differentiation, but more than 99% of the code is the same, yeah.
So one app or one generic app decline across many of your customers. You said several hundreds. Close to 1,000, you said?
More than 1,000, yeah.
More than 1,000 version of this app that needs to be built. But if it is React Native, tell me if I'm wrong, you can compile and create the iOS binary on Linux, and you just need Mac to sign it.
Yeah, you don't need Mac for the Android app. You can do everything on a Linux. Typically, a container ran in your Kubernetes cluster, which is what we do for Android. So you can update, create app at scale without any issue, as soon as you have your CI.
You push.
Yeah, you push a commit and basically you push a tag more specifically, and based on that, you have your autoscaler on the cluster. You create all the pods, containers, and all the processing power you need to build the apps, and everything is automated.
But that's Android. On Mac, Android. It's a bit different. You have to have a macOS machine for the build, but mostly for the signature, because Mac apps are signed, and before you're able to distribute it on the App Store, it has to be signed by you. And that signature option is only supported. Maybe it works, but it's only supported on macOS. So how you were managing the CI/CD chain before putting it on the cloud on AWS?
This has been a very, very huge issue for us in the past 5 years, to be perfectly transparent with you. We have bare metal Mac Mini in our offices. We have a few of them, and we have to configure them manually. We have a set of scripts to initialize them. We have to be sure that the keychain is unlocked. We need human or TeamViewer connection just to be sure we unlock it correctly.
Yeah, that the screen is open, so that because
exactly, yeah.
I have to make a little parenthesis to explain what you said there. The secret for the signature are held into the keychain, which is a secure database managed by the operating system, and that keychain by default is locked. You need to open it so that application can access the secrets in there. And that opening is made automatically when you log in on the screen. On your Mac, when you log in on your screen, it unlocks the keychain. So your CI/CD machines have to have a graphical user interface session started.
But you also need to remove the screensaver to be sure that the machine
it doesn't relock.
Yeah, and obviously it creates some clear security concerns when you have this run in your office.
And how many of these machines you had?
So
like 3, 4, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it was like literally a Mac Mini sitting in a closet or under a desk.
With a multiplexer to be sure that we can use the same keyboard for all of them and just one screen. But it's quite an exotic setup, to be honest.
And I guess because with so many customers, you have to maintain different version of macOS with different version of Xcode to support multiple version of iOS. So you are like a matrix of different operating systems and Xcode versions. Yeah, and the hard part is that when you want to add a new Mac Mini and to configure it, you might think that it's easy. You can just run some script, install Xcode and your certificate and everything. But there are always some discrepancies always. And when you run a new Mac, you know that you will have new challenge to configure it fully. So it's really, I would say it's not a scalable solution. It's quite costly, and obviously as it's a computer running in the office, you have a lot of, I would say, uninteresting changes, such as the network connectivity, the security issues that I mentioned earlier. And you have an idea of the workload that it represents to manage even just 2 or 3, 4 machines like that? Is it like a few hours per week from one person, one system administrator? It's a bit less than that, but we take more than a day to fully configure one Mac. To bring a new machine to the game. Yeah, and the problem is that when you have a new Xcode version and when you want to upgrade your Mac, basically it's going to take more than a week to just be sure all your Mac are running correctly. And from time to time, one is not running. It's for 1 week or 2 weeks, you have a less processing power. It's again, not scalable, not a repeatable solution. Mm-hmm. And tadam, came Amazon EC2 Mac. So EC2 is a virtual machine service from AWS. And like 3 or 4 years ago, we introduced the possibility to launch Mac OS. So it's not a virtual machine, it's a bare metal host. It's really a Mac Mini, which is dedicated for your own usage for a period of time. So when did you start to look at that? What's the first step to evaluate if it was a viable solution for you? The first step, of course, is the cost evaluation. So is it something that is going to help us? What will be the costs? It was a no-brainer, actually. But it was the first question that we asked ourselves. Mm-hmm. The second one was, how can we do a POC, a proof of concept, on this? And as you mentioned earlier, the big challenge is the keychain, how you unlock it, how you do it on a headless machine. We needed to
to just provision some time to do the exploration, to test it. And this was not something you could do in 1 hour. It was more than a week of just being sure that it's going to match our needs. And our needs are a bit specific because we have more than 1,000 applications. We have a very specific Fastlane setup with some specific organization for what we call what Apple call the provisioning profiles, the profiles, the certificates, and all these questions. As we have something quite custom, there is no an easy solution on the web. You first need to do your POC to be sure it's going to work. So the main blocker for us was to allocate a few weeks, a bit of time on a challenge on which not a lot of people are actually working inside the company because the setup on the bare metal Mac is running, and this was our main challenge. But as soon as we had a POC, everything went quite smoothly, I would say.
So typically when I talk about CI/CD on macOS, one of the challenges you said is the keychain, because these machines in the cloud don't have a screen and a keyboard attached to it, so you cannot easily log into it like you would do on a Mac Mini sitting on your desk. So how do you manage unlocking the keychain and storing secrets in the keychain?
To resolve this issue, we actually use a bash script, which is running on the headless system. This script is unlocking the keychain and relocking it after. This was done with the help of AWS, as it's a very specific and technical subject. And
I will share the link to that script in the notes of this podcast. So if you're interested, you can see that on GitHub. But there is more than the keychain. You also need to install your build tool, so Xcode, at least the command line from Xcode, Fastlane. Is it something you're doing when you bring a new machine to the group, or you did that once and you keep like an image of the machine that you can restart after?
So there is really 3 phases on the initialization of the machine. The first one is a bunch of scripts which are going to install the basics tool, Xcode, Ruby, etc.
And Fastlane is written in Ruby, so you also have a dependency on
and
Ruby.
you need the right version of Ruby.
Yes, that's a bit painful, I know.
Yeah, it is. So you want to use RB-env, which is a virtual environment for Ruby, but it's not as plug and play as it looks like on a real machine. So first step is to create the AMI. So we did it via script, so we have a repeatable system, but we saved the AMI like this with this system. And then you need to open your machine, and you need to have your machine open connected to RCI. For RCI, we use GitLab, but for that you need a few daemons to be running, especially also the GitLab agents, but also Watchman. And this is injected at the beginning as what AWS call a bootstrap, the bootstrap ace.
It's a script that runs at the very first invocation of an EC2 machine, all machines, Linux, Windows, and Mac. So at the very first boot of that machine, you have your script that install the GitLab agent, you said, and Watchman, and Xcode, and things like that are installed
Xcode
there.
is already installed before. It's scripted, but it's on the AMI directly. But it's more on the system daemon. So Watchman, mostly Watchman and the GitLab. You have a few challenge to overcome to have Watchman and GitLab, because you are running it as a system daemon and not as a user daemon, which is not the way it's installed on your regular Mac. But these are easily overcome with a bit of time, but still a bit of challenge.
With a bit of time. No, but what you said, it's important as well, because most of the instruction we can follow on the internet assume that you are following these instructions from your Mac. So you have a screen, you have a session, the keychain is unlocked. What happened in the cloud is a bit different. There is no session. So the way the daemons are started needs to be a bit configured so that they can still access things that belongs to the session normally, like the keychain. But it's a one-time configuration. Once you figure out how to do it, after that, it just works.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a trick. You can remove Watchman. It's going to work. Just for you to know.
So you're using a GitLab as an orchestrator there. It means you need to install an agent, and that agent must start at the boot of the machine. Is there, I don't remember the GitLab agent procedure. Is there like a one-time key or something that you need to do manual, or is it fully automated?
Yeah, and the good way of doing it is to have your Mac being able to communicate with GitLab servers directly and to create a token for the runner. So you have to first create your token, then
with
register
a script,
it.
like a command line.
Yeah,
to create a token.
a usual command line that you run at the boot. Then you create your token via GitLab servers API, sorry, and you install it on the right place, and then your boot finished, and the runner is going to register directly to GitLab CI servers.
And your GitLab CI is running in the cloud in your AWS account as well, or is it the service from GitLab.com?
We use the hosted version of GitLab, but all our CI/CD executed in-house. So it's a bit of both.
And you said you're working with AMI, with Xcode pre-installed. You know how many combination of macOS and Xcode version do you maintain over time?
For now, we did not dive into this kind of configuration. We have one AMI which is working with the most recent version of the iOS SDK. The idea is that we are going to reuse our automated script to create basically the AMI on every new upgrade of not iOS, sorry, macOS, iOS SDK, etc. So for now we'll keep one, then we will create a new one based on our script and adapt it a bit with an image builder system. And in the future, what we also want to do is to be able to target outdated version of the iOS SDK, because we are going to develop business apps. So not really for the B2C customers, people like me going to the yoga or Pilates, but also for the teachers of the studio and the manager of the studio. And for them, it's less users, but people for whom you really want to have an app, even if the iOS is old, totally outdated, etc.
Of an iPad or mobile phone.
So this is really our next step for the business apps, but we are not here yet on the business apps.
Just a tip for those listening. A few weeks or months ago, Image Builder released the capability to build a macOS image. So you don't need to do what you did, to create script and automate all the process of creating the AMI by yourself. You can just rely, or just quote rely on Image Builder to do it. They will create, maintain, and distribute the AMI across multiple regions as well. Multi-region, I guess it's not a challenge for you. It's currently one in one region. Are you scaling? Because another challenge for customer using EC2 Mac, because they are dedicated machine, dedicated hardware, it's a bit more difficult to scale than virtual machines. Have you already looked at EC2 scaling on macOS?
Yeah, but first I want to say that it's much easier to scale than what we had before. Obviously, with the bare metal machines.
Yeah, because going to the App Store, buying a Mac Mini, coming back here, it takes a lot of time to bring a new machine to the cluster.
And just if I can jump on the subject, but if we want to update our old apps, as we have more than 1,000 apps again, if you want to update all of them, you have something like half an hour of build time, like initialization, running, and publishing to the store. And this means that with a few machines, 3 or 4 Mac Minis, you can only run a certain number of updates. Of builds, yeah. This means that we have some version of the application that we consider stable and some that needs to be updated. But it's very hard to have all the application of bsport all up to date.
I guess the version management, the release management with more than 1,000 apps, it's a science in its own field. We can probably record another episode for that. Yeah. But going back to autoscaling, are you using autoscaling with dedicated host? So
we definitely autoscale now on via AWS. So what we do is we have a Terraform module, which is Terraform is a tool to basically have a code matching your infrastructure. So in the code we say we want these numbers of Mac Minis, of host, and EC2 instances to be more specific. And then we have a custom script which is analyzing the depth of the CI/CD queue. So how many build do we need? Based on that, it estimates how many hours of build do we need. It analyzes how many hosts are available, and if it is not enough, it's going to make a very small commit on our Terraform repo, changing basically one number to say, okay, I don't want 3 Mac Minis now, I want 10. And this, in one command, is going to deploy 7 new Mac Minis automatically.
So it will acquire a new dedicated host, start an EC2 instance with the predefined AMI, with your tools already installed, with the script that you talk about at Bootstrap that will install the GitLab agent, register the GitLab agent, and then the machine will start to accept the build coming from the GitLab CI.
Exactly,
server.
And it's all automated.
Automatically.
Yeah,
That's the
which is quite amazing.
How do you scale down? Because scaling up is good for your build time, but scaling down is good as well for your build.
Basically, this script is running every hour, and it will basically try to remove the instances if it's not if there are too many of them. It might fail because on AWS you reserve your host, for 24 hours and not for a few minutes, as you can do with EC2 instances, because it's a real machine. Mm-hmm. But we are managing this kind of error, and usually at our scale it's not the big problem. Big problem is more that we want to have a huge number of, 10 or 20 number of hosts available, and if we have a few hours of too many Macs, it's not that of a problem.
Yeah, when you allocate them, it's for 24 hours minimum, because that's how EC2 Mac works. There are licensing consideration. I'm not going to enter into the details now. So you allocate the machines. You have to you cannot release them before 24 hours, but after that you can release them whenever you want. So when your script runs,
but also on that, when our script, when it requests a new Mac Mini on the cloud, it knows that this Mac Mini will be used, is needed for the number of builds that we have on the queue. So there are not that many time slots on which we want to reduce the number of hosts, but that we have too many. So it's not really, operationally speaking, it's done correctly, so that's not a problem. But obviously you need to check every hours, do we need all these Macs?
And when your script says, no, we don't need that one, and it didn't run for 24 hours yet, as you said, there will be an error, but 1 hour later the script will try again and again and again, and eventually it will free the machine, and the machine will be just released, and you stop paying for it. That's the most important.
Exactly. Just by modifying one number in one config file.
In Terraform, that is running that one on Docker. On
this one is on an Linux machine, yes.
What are the challenges you had when implementing this solution? We talk about many different aspects you had to pay attention, like the auto scaling we just mentioned, like the keychain management and things like that. But if you have to look at that project with now a few months back, what are the specific challenges that you had to build a solution?
Really, it's the fact that you are kind of alone when working with this kind of issue. It's very surprising. You might think that building an iOS app is something that everyone does, and it's pretty standard, and actually it is not. So I would say the main challenge is more meta challenge, like you need to change a bit your way of thinking of software engineering and developing a process, and be ready to have your hands dirty, I would say. Face the challenge that we mentioned earlier with the headless machine. Be sure to develop your own somehow creative way of managing your CI and your auto scaling, and find the right interlocutors and the right technical expertise on the web, but also in real life. I don't think there are one big challenge that we did not mention earlier, but it's really a way of working with such a system that it's
you're clear. Right. The lack of documentation for me that strikes me, because there are tons of documentation that explain how to do CI on the Mac, but they all assume it's a Mac on your desk with a graphical user interface, and unfortunately macOS doesn't behave the same way when there is no user session on the screen, or when there is a user session on the screen, and in the cloud obviously there is no screen. So, so we have to learn that.
And you have some specific issue that might arise. And for just giving one example, but we are working with push notification, and we are working with a system of certificate that requires two-factor authentication with Apple. This was a no-go actually for the solution, because you cannot have a two-factor authentication run into a headless machine, enter it in a CI/CD script automated, unless you are doing something semi-legal. So that's not something that we want to do. But there are solutions. There are other ways to manage your push notification with the API, and there are always solutions for that at scale, but you need to face the unknown. And you are not even sure you are going to succeed. And the push notification actually was one of the blockers that we had before starting this. When we unlock this situation, we realized that we can go on the cloud, basically.
Okay, now you are there. You have an idea, or can you share the size of your cluster? Okay, it's scaling, but it's between how many hosts and how many builds you're doing per week, per day?
So actually, it's opening a new world of possibility for us.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of things that we did not think about because we knew that doing a frequent update is something impossible. So we had a very specific update process on the app to minimize this kind of issue. Now we plan to upgrade all our apps once a week, and just immediately if there is a hotfix on that. And this means that we want to be able in 24 hours, because this is the smallest window of time in which we need to think.
Allocate a host. Yeah.
And then we need to think of our build on 24 hours. But we want to be able to upgrade everything in 24 hours. So you have more than 1,000, but let's say it's 1,000. You divide that by 30 minutes of build, and you see the number of machines that we need.
That's a lot.
And this is scaling actually.
Because on one machine, 24 hours, half an hour, you said, for a build, it means you can build like roughly 48 apps. Yeah. And you have 1,000, more than 1,000
yes.
of that. So that's a lot of machines. That's 200 machines.
But if you have a hotfix, you might want to be able to upgrade everything all at once. And this is scaling. It's more private business details, but we are scaling quite fast, and we are adding apps every week.
And it will increase. The 1,000 is the current mark today, but thankfully for you, you will have more. What are the future? So you said it opens new possibilities to build other things that you are thinking in terms of improvement to the system?
So we touched a bit the subject of the AMI, so building, targeting different SDK and targeting all device not supported by Apple, let's say. So this is something that we want to address, and especially for the B2B, the business apps. And there is another subject that we want to address, is basically not having separated host, EC2 instance running in the AWS, and having our Kubernetes cluster managing all the CI/CD, which is how we do for Android. We want to have common system, and basically this means that we want this Mac Mini to be pods
integrated inside your Kubernetes.
Exactly. Yeah. So there is, again, not much documentation online on how to do it. There is this problem of how you avoid basically the Docker container when you want to run your CI inside the Kubernetes cluster, which is a very specific problem. But this would be very helpful to remove all or almost all custom scripts to manage this system, and to have a tool such as Carpenter managing the provisioning of these hosts, and just a very specific custom KEDA metric, for example, analyzing what is the size of the queue and how of the CI/CD queue, and how many machines do we want to target. This way, we'll have a very, very similar system between Android and iOS. Everything run into our cluster with all the optimization, the usual optimization that you can do in a Kubernetes cluster.
That's the dream of many customers running EC2 Mac. It's finding a way to integrate that into a Kubernetes cluster. I guess it involves writing some kind of Kubernetes driver, controller. I'm not a Kubernetes person. I don't know the exact word, but to make a machine, a macOS machine, appear like a pod. I know it's possible. I talked to someone who did it, but I don't think there is anything in open source or anything available yet. So if you're a Kubernetes developer, if you know Mac, contact me. I will put you in touch. Yeah, exactly. Leave your feedback on the platform where you're listening to this podcast. Sofiane, thank you very much for your explanation. Building more than 1,000 iOS applications in your CI/CD chain on EC2 Mac. That's 1,000 applications.
And maintaining them up to date. Yeah.
It's really a lot. Thank you for your very clear explanation. Thank you for having listened to this episode until the end. And now, go build.